Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Dr. Cyrus Khambatta and Robby Barbaro. Dr. Cyrus and Robby are doing some amazing work and are helping so many people, so I'm excited to have them on to share their stories with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnson. You can also check out my website at drkaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, also be sure to check out the Shop tab, where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series and learn about the Unlock Wellness Project, which applies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Dr. Cyrus Khambatta and Robby Barbaro. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Dr. Cyrus Khambatta and Robby Barbaro. And Dr. Cyrus and Robby are the founders of Mastering Diabetes, which is a coaching program designed to help maximize your insulin sensitivity using a whole food plant-based diet. And I was connected to these two amazing people through Adam Sudd, who was a past podcast guest and has an incredible story as well. So also be sure to go back and check out my episode with Adam as well. But I'm just extremely excited to have Dr. Cyrus and Robby on to share their stories and just all of the amazing work they're doing with Mastering Diabetes. So Dr. Cyrus and Robby, thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm extremely honored to have you guys both here.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and I'm so glad you interviewed Adam. Adam's actually part of our coaching team. He's amazing. Love that guy.
Awesome. Yeah, I know we were, Robby, before you jumped on, I was talking to Dr. Cyrus. I'm like, yeah, I had to try really hard not to cry during my podcast with him because his story is just so emotional, but he's just doing some really amazing work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, I wanted to jump into both of your backstories a little bit before we jump into Mastering Diabetes, but just kind of what's your health look like at a young age and how it's progressed to where it is right now. So, whoever wants to go first, you can just kind of dive into it.
Go ahead, Cyrus.
Okay, so I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 22, which is actually kind of a late diagnosis for what is usually considered to be juvenile onset diabetes. And so, 22 years old, I'm a senior in college. I'm just trying to finish school and go on with my life. And all of a sudden, I'm finding myself drinking, more than a gallon of water per day, every 30 minutes, just drinking water, and getting thirstier and thirstier by the minute. And then you go into the bathroom, urinating 15, 16, 20 times a day, losing all my energy. I felt terrible, just incredibly terrible. But I didn't really understand what was happening at the time. So I called my sister and I said, hey, what's happening? Because she's a doctor of osteopathy. And she turned to me and she said, hey, everything you're saying is indicating that you have type 1 diabetes. Just please go to the hospital right now. So I followed her advice. I went to the health clinic and then I went to the hospital. And when they checked my blood glucose, it was like a 680 something, which is like 6 times higher than my blood glucose should have been at the time.
Wow.
And that explained everything. So, I was in this fragile situation called DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis. Don't remember that. But the idea here is that the beta cells in my pancreas had basically stopped being able to manufacture insulin. And as a result of that, my glucose was now extremely high and, it left me feeling the way I was feeling. So while I was in the hospital, the doctors basically were going through my medical history and they said, oh, did you realize that you now have 3 autoimmune conditions? You developed 3 autoimmune conditions within the past 6 months. So the first one was Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. And the second one is alopecia universalis, which is why I have no hair, I have no eyebrows, I have no ear hair, no nose hair, no armpit hair, nothing. And then the third one was type 1 diabetes. So it's just like a 1, 2, 3 punch within 6 months. And I had no idea what was going on. I mean, here I am. I thought I was a healthy guy. I thought I was eating well. I mean, I'm exercising every day, but yet all of this is happening to me and it just doesn't make any sense. So I followed the advice of the doctors at the time, and they said, eat a low carbohydrate diet, because living with type 1 diabetes, the only way to control your blood glucose is to eat a low carbohydrate diet. Because if you eat fruits and potatoes and beans and quinoa and rice and breads and cereals and pastas, then your blood glucose is going to go up, and then you're going to need to inject more insulin. So we're trying to keep that whole system, relatively controllable. And so the easiest way to do that is to not eat carbohydrate rich foods. So I said, okay, sounds good. I mean, you're talking to a guy who grew up being kind of a carnivore, like I was the guy who would finish, a giant plate of meatloaf, and then I would eat, a lamb chop after that. And then I would go finish my sister's food, and then I would finish my mom's food. And then I would eat a giant plate of, like a banana split for breakfast or for dessert.
The house disposal, right?
Exactly. Garbage disposal, no question. So, you're telling somebody with a voracious appetite to eat more of the foods that he loved to eat in the first place. And I said, okay, here we go. I'll do this. So, a year into this process, I was eating, lots of meats and cheeses and fish and turkey burgers. And I just started to feel just terrible. I mean, I was already feeling pretty low energy to begin with. And then it got worse and worse and worse. Finally, to the point where I was like, okay, this is terrible. Like, I can't even exercise anymore. I have like so low energy, I can barely get I can go out of bed or get out of bed and go to work. I was anxious, I was depressed, I was frustrated, my glucose was all over the place. So I said, enough is enough. Started reading, started going to scientific lectures, just started picking up everything that I could to get my hands on diabetes. And one thing led to another, and this idea of being a plant-based eater just popped into my vision. And I started talking with people, and they said, oh, have you considered being a vegetarian or a vegan? And I said, no, not at all. I'm totally open though, because I feel terrible. So before I knew it, I was, I signed up to be under the guidance of a guy named Doug Graham, who is, he went on to write a book called the 80-10-10 diet. And he basically teaches people all around the world how to eat a raw food vegan diet. And, at the age of 23, a raw food vegan diet, like that's extreme. That's as extreme as it gets.
Right.
But, I said, whatever, if this guy really can help me out, then why would I not listen to what he has to say? So under his supervision, I basically changed my diet overnight, and I started eating literally nothing but fruits and vegetables. And in a very short period of time, my blood glucose became extremely controllable. I mean, I'm literally talking within 24 hours. And then it got better, and then it got better, and then it got better. And then my energy returned, and then I got more hydrated, and then I could sleep at night. And it just was like this gift that kept on giving over and over and over again. So I ended up feeling so good and getting such good control over my blood glucose and reducing my insulin use by 40% in a short period of time that I put myself back to school to go get a PhD in nutritional biochemistry so that I could understand the science. Because I had this really fascinating experiment undergoing in my body, and I really wanted to learn more about it so I could describe it using, science as opposed to just like, a story. And so while I was at school, I was able to study insulin resistance and really understand what are the causes of blood glucose fluctuation, and how does that pertain to somebody living with type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes or prediabetes or gestational diabetes. And by doing so, I was able to really focus in on, what elements of food causes blood glucose instability, and what elements of food actually allow you to get fantastic control of your blood glucose and kiss diabetes goodbye for those living with prediabetes and type 2.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Were your doctors like were they kind of in disbelief because you were kind of doing everything like opposite of what they just told you to do?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, my first endocrinologist, I remember, he's a very good guy. He just didn't really know that much about nutrition. And he just didn't understand. He didn't want to even talk to me about it. So anytime, I was getting a better A1C value, which is a sort of marker of your average blood glucose, he would just look at the numbers and he'd be like, hey, you're doing great. Whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. And then he would leave the office. And I was like, all right, I guess that's our discussion about nutrition. Cool.
Man, no, that's amazing. It's really cool hearing stories like that, because there's just so many people that are suffering with that and really just don't have any type of hope because they think they're doing the right things, but it's like, it's hard, if you're dealing with something like that, especially at a young age, like you're like, just listen to a doctor, right? Because they have all the answers and not really willing to experiment to see, okay, well, maybe something else is going to work even better for me. Like you were feeling awful. I mean, you're in your 20s. That should be like when you have the most energy of your life, right? So it's just like, I can't imagine like what your own personal hope level was at, like when you were just trying to figure everything out.
Yeah. I mean, there's a sort of desire on the inside to like want to, like my desire to want to feel better was so strong that I was willing to implement any information that could potentially lead me in the right direction. And it just so turned out that the first thing that I came across was the solution that, I've gone on to research and, become more of an expert in. So I was fortunate in that I didn't have to spend years and years and years experimenting around with many different diets or many different sort of dietary approaches. But, it's just been, once you find it, you just feel like $1 million. That's all I can say.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. And what about you, Robby? Kind of walk us through your backstory as well.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 18 years ago. So I just turned 30 and I was 12 years old when I was diagnosed with type 1. And I have 2 older brothers. My middle brother was diagnosed with type 1 many years before me. So our family was very familiar with the condition. I was familiar with it. And it was an adjustment, but it didn't, completely rock my world, mainly because the way my parents parented me and said, hey, look, this is just an inconvenience. Don't worry, you can do whatever you want. And they helped me learn the ropes of type 1 diabetes. So initially, I was following the standard American diet, and I got, had a lot of health challenges. So I had terrible acne as a teenager. I was getting sick every year. So I would take Claritin D and Nasonex and all these medications and still got sick every year. And I was a competitive tennis player who suffered from plantar fasciitis. That's a very painful condition in the foot. And I had to wear blue boots at night in order to try and fix that. And it wasn't until I changed my diet that I actually solved that problem. So eventually, I never really, diabetes wasn't like my blood glucose and managing it. That wasn't necessarily ever a big issue for me. I was very type A. I was always on top of things and things were pretty much under control. What got me into this lifestyle is that I read a book that planted a seed in my mind that it would be possible to reverse type 1 diabetes. And I just set my mind, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to do the impossible. And my mindset's always been, look, people told Roger Bannister that it's impossible to run a 4-minute mile. The smartest people in the world said that. And he went out there and he did it. He ran a 4-minute mile and now lots of people do it. So I know for a fact we are going to solve this at some point. People living with type 1, we are going to find a way for our beta cells to produce insulin again, and we can reverse type 1. But for the time being, like Cyrus said, I've had the exact same experience of maximizing my insulin sensitivity and making my blood glucose incredibly predictable while following a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet. So in my journey of living with type 1 over the past 18 years, I've tried a standard American diet. I've tried a Weston A. Price animal product-based low-carb diet, and I've tried a vegan, plant-based low-carb diet. So I have a lot of the experience of what happens when you truly follow a ketogenic diet and why that's so confusing for people living with diabetes. So I hope we get into that in this show, and Cyrus can talk a lot about it in an article we just recently released. But the point is, I'll just touch on it briefly. When I followed a low carbohydrate diet, I was taking the least amount of insulin I had ever taken. So as a person living with type 1 diabetes, you want to take roughly 0.6 units per kilogram of body weight, okay? That's how much insulin is a ballpark figure of what a person living with type 1 should need to inject, because that is the amount the pancreas would secrete if we didn't have diabetes, okay? So as people living with diabetes, type 1 diabetes, we want to inject the same amount our pancreas would have normally secreted before our beta cells stopped working. So when I followed the low carbohydrate, the vegan ketogenic diet, I was taking about 10 units of insulin per day total. And that's very low. So On the math for me, I'm about 66 kilograms because I'm about to roughly 38 total units. That's what my pancreas would normally be secreting while following a healthy diet. So I have that experience of following that and seeing what happens. So yes, my blood glucose was flat. My total insulin use was low, but I felt like crap. I had no energy. I was a student at the University of Florida at the time, had several situations where I almost blacked out on campus. It was very scary. And I was at a loss. I hit a plateau, and my insulin wasn't going down anymore. And in hindsight, I learned that taking less and less insulin is only a good thing if you know at the same time you're starting to produce more of your own. So if I could prove to myself that, when I was doing the ketogenic diet and I was lowering my total insulin use, if I could prove that my pancreas was also compensating and starting to produce more of its own insulin, that would be a good thing. But that's not what was happening for me, and there's no evidence to show that's happening for anybody else. So taking less and less is not a good thing in that case. So eventually I go and now I learn from the same person Cyrus learned from, Doug Graham. Cyrus was actually the testimonial in his book, and I was inspired by that. That helps me get into this. And I saw pictures of him he was ripped on the internet and being active. I'm like, this is awesome. And I showed my parents, I'm going to do this. And at that time, my total insulin usage went up, but my insulin sensitivity is what changed dramatically. So while I'm doing a low carbohydrate diet, being roughly 30 grams of carbohydrate per day, taking 10 units, that's a 3-to-1 ratio. Now I'm eating well over 700 grams of carbohydrate per day and taking about 38 units. You do the math, that's 19-to-1. So it's a dramatic change in insulin sensitivity. And I know we'll go into more detail on why that's so important in this podcast today.
Definitely. No, I love that. I love both of your stories. And I know you said that you saw Dr. Cyrus on one of the testimonials. So how did you two actually meet? Did you just shoot him an email and you're like, hey, let's make something work?
It's super funny. We knew of each other. I don't think he knew I was. I knew who he was first, obviously. And then eventually we'd known of each other through Doug Graham. So we'd stay in touch with him and Doug would mention each other. And, but we didn't actually meet in person for many, many years down the road. We actually were speaking at an event in San Francisco. And that's when we first met. I'm not sure exactly how many years ago it was. Do you know, Cyrus?
Yeah, I think it was 2010. So 7 years ago.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, that's really cool. Just, how it all plays out. And then all of a sudden you guys are just making this amazing program together. So, let's just dive into just the whole Mastering Diabetes program. What sparked that just desire to want to even create this whole coaching program, and walk us through it, what people can expect to find, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
So what I think people in the world of diabetes have let me put it this way. Okay. The world of diabetes can be very confusing, can be extremely confusing because, the whole disease, if you want to even call it that, the whole set of symptoms is based around blood sugar, blood glucose. And so people are sort of, from the minute you get diagnosed with diabetes, the word sugar is the first word in your vocabulary. And then it's reinforced sugar, blood sugar, blood glucose. And so it promotes this idea that anything that is remotely related to sugar is bad for you and that you have to avoid it in order to keep control of your blood sugar or your blood glucose. So as a result of that, the natural extension of that is, okay, well, if sugar's bad, then that means that mangoes are also bad for you because mangoes metabolize to sugar, and that strawberries are also bad for you because they metabolize to sugar, and so are potatoes, and so is quinoa, and so is bread and cereal and pasta, because all of that just metabolizes to sugar. And that's the problem, right? So it's easy to sort of fall into this trap, where you first vilify sugar and then you point a finger at anything that contains carbohydrate, thinking, oh, carbohydrate equals sugar, and therefore that's going to make my life difficult with diabetes, and it's going to make me fat, and it's going to increase my risk for cancer and heart disease. Okay, but the truth of the matter is that sugar is a white crystalline refined substance that man made that either started with a beet or with sugar cane. So you take a plant You take it and you put it through a ridiculous refining process where you first harvest it, and then you crack it, and then you dehydrate it, and then you grind it, and then you mill it again, and then you maybe rehydrate it, and then you crystallize it, and you end up with this really, really refined substance that we call sugar. And this is either white table sugar, or you can further process it into high fructose corn syrup, or sorbitol, or mannitol, or dextrose, or any of these other sugar synonyms. But you end up with what's considered a very, very refined product that is devoid of vitamins, of minerals, of fiber, of water, and of antioxidants. It has a zero fat, has zero protein. It's got nothing. It's literally nothing but either glucose by itself or fructose, or some combination of the two of those. Okay. So that is if we referred to that and only that as sugar, then great. There would be no confusion. Nobody, whether you're from the paleo world, or whether you're from the plant-based world, or whether you're from the ketogenic world, nobody is telling you to eat more sugar. So we can all agree that sugar, like the refined substance that we refer to sugar, is actually not health promoting. Great. But where the confusion lies is that, people say, well, potatoes metabolize to sugar and fruits metabolize to sugar, and that's all bad for you. If we use the word sugar to describe what's in a potato, or we use the word sugar to describe what's in a fruit, we're completely misrepresenting it, completely. Because if you take a look at a mango as an example, what you have are, you have carbohydrate energy, whole carbohydrate, long chain whole carbohydrates. You have protein, you have fat, you have fiber, you have water, antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. So this is by definition, because it has all three macronutrients, the protein, carbohydrate, and fat, and it has the micronutrients. By definition, it's a whole food. And whole foods behave in a completely different manner than do refined substances. So when you consume a mango, you have a whole complex series of thousands of metabolic reactions which are happening simultaneously inside of your digestive system, which are allowing your digestive system to pull out both the macronutrients and the micronutrients and use them for energy. And what ends up happening is that, the carbohydrate energy that's inside of a mango gets broken up into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces until you do end up with just glucose or just fructose. And then those molecules are then transported to your brain and your liver and your kidney and your muscles, and they're used for energy, right? So the end product is glucose, or the end product is fructose, and that's what's used. But in order to get to the end product, you either allow your body to break it down and metabolize it the way that your body is designed to do it, or you let a manufacturing process do it. And when you let a manufacturing process do it and you end up with just the refined substance, you get a lot of problems, a whole host of metabolic disorders. But when you allow your digestive system to do it, then this whole problem of like eating too much sugar is not actually true. So it's a fallacy completely. So it's a long-winded way of saying that when you eat foods that contain whole carbohydrate energy, as long as they are truly whole foods and they come prepackaged with all the micronutrients, then those micronutrients actually protect the macronutrients from getting, from causing metabolic disorders. And so in our coaching program, which I'll hand it off to Robby, he can explain the whole program here, but in our coaching program, we teach people how to eat whole foods. And if they're carbohydrate rich, all the better, because carbohydrates are not your enemy. They never were. And it's actually foods that are high in fat that cause insulin resistance.
Right. And I thank you so much for that explanation, because I think it's, it's super important to understand. It's like, it's just considering the source, Dr. Cyrus, it's like,
for sure.
Like you said, if we would just think of, refined white sugar as, hey, that's sugar, and not try to get, it's just insane. Like, I know all of us are in the same world where we see like different opinions and like just the different definitions of what it's happening. Like when you eat certain foods, like, I've seen so many programs that are just like zero fruit, like that's it, fruit's the enemy. But it's just like, it's crazy when you don't consider the source of, hey, well, that fruit has fiber, it has water, like your body knows exactly what to do with that whole fruit. It's just consider the source in anything that you're consuming.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, absolutely. And Robby, if you wanted to jump more into the program, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, so we are really, really proud about what we offer in our coaching program. And I'd just like to say on that topic, people will try, let's say they go ahead and they try and eat some bananas, or they try and eat some potatoes or rice because they heard somebody like us say, or they heard a podcast. And then they go and they're living with diabetes and they see their blood glucose spike. I think we totally understand, why that's confusing. And it's a really exciting opportunity for us to explain the science behind what happened, why the potato, why the fruit is not actually the real problem, and it's actually insulin resistance. So it's very fun for us to have that opportunity. So in our coaching program, we work on the nitty-gritty with people. That's what we're super excited about. That's what we're offering that wasn't created before we created this program. So I was working at Forks Over Knives for 6 years, had a lot of fun there, publishing a lot of amazing articles and testimonials and products and information. But if you were a person living with diabetes and you wanted somebody to really be there with you every step of the way of the process of transitioning, there really wasn't a place to go. And that's what we've created here with Mastering Diabetes, with our website full of education, and now our coaching program where we support people every single day, every step of the way. So our program has 3 different tools. The first tool in our coaching program is an online course that we have put our heart and soul into building over the course of many years. Cyrus's education through his PhD. It's very robust, but also very easy to understand and laid out in a step-by-step manner. So it's not overwhelming. We give people just the information they need right when they need it. So you join the program, you start doing goal setting, then we have modules on changing your breakfast, and you do that first. You learn some more of the science and the reasoning behind this. Once you've mastered breakfast, you move into lunch. Once you've mastered lunch and tried a bunch of new recipes and new foods, you get into dinner. You start cleaning out your pantry. And once you've mastered those meals, then we go into intermittent fasting. We go into exercising, lots of logistics about social situations, handling your family, traveling, kitchen tools, recipes. All the nuanced stuff is in our online course, and it's constantly growing. We're adding more and more material. So that's tool number 1. And the second tool is we have a private Facebook group. And this is where our coaches are in there every single day of the year, answering questions within 24 hours. So anytime, you join the program, you start changing your breakfast and you start having questions, or your blood glucose is high and you're wondering why, or is this food okay? What should I eat at this restaurant? We're there with you every step of the way. You make a post in the Facebook group and you get answers usually within hours from the community, and at least within 24 hours from one of our coaches. That's either me, that's Cyrus, that's Cyrus's wife, Kylie Buckner, who's a registered nurse. We have Adam Sudd, who has been on your show. He completely reversed type 2 diabetes, has an amazing story and a lot of experience coaching people through working at Whole Foods. And we have Mark Ramirez, another person who completely reversed his type 2 diabetes. He's one of our coaches in our program. And these coaches are there with you every step of the way. So really proud about that. And then we do twice monthly live Q&A calls. So the first and third Sunday is an opportunity for people to come and see us on a live call and ask us questions. And me or Cyrus and our other coaches, we're there and we answer them. And it's really fun to have that dialogue and that conversation. And a lot of people come and just listen. And a lot of people come and get their questions answered. So we do that twice a month. And this entire program, we've made it very affordable. It's $29 per month to join our coaching program. It's a membership, and people can come and join us at an affordable rate. So that's how our program works.
No, that sounds just so incredible, especially if you're dealing with that, just having, just the community alone, because just feeling like you're not alone. And if you actually have a question, it's not just asking somebody that's never dealt with diabetes before. You can talk to somebody who actually knows where you're coming from and is, reversing it in a way that you're trying to. I just think that sense of community is so empowering. But the way that you were describing how it's laid out is just, it's just so amazing. Basically for, like you said, dealing with family members or traveling or, topics that maybe people have read a little bit about, but not sure how to implement, like intermittent fasting. I think that's huge. I love every aspect of that you just explained. Just amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And have you just kind of side note, because I haven't researched much with intermittent fasting with diabetes. Have you, is that something that you recommend like throughout the entire course, or like on again, off again? Just kind of like quick.
Cyrus is an expert on this topic.
Yeah, so intermittent fasting, it's funny. When I was in grad school, I had the opportunity to study insulin resistance, but mainly to study how intermittent fasting can be used as a tool to reverse insulin resistance and reverse diabetes. So once I delved into the research, I mean, it is one of the most unbelievable topics of research I have ever come across, because back in the 1930s, scientists first started experimenting with intermittent fasting in rats, and they figured out that rats that eat even 10% less than their counterparts or 25% less than their counterparts lived longer. So it's almost like the less food they gave them, the longer these rats lived. So they would restrict their food either from 10% or 20% or 30% or 60% restriction. Wow. In comparison with their, what's called ad lib or all you can eat counterparts. And the animals that had the most restricted diets, literally like 50 to 60% calorie restricted, they ended up living 50 to 60% longer than the other animals. And it was like, this was the first time that scientists were sort of discovering that, calorie restriction can actually increase longevity. So since that time, scientists have gone on and they've proven the exact same mechanism or collection of mechanisms is at play in yeast, in worms, in flies, in rats, in mice, in dogs, in pigs, and in monkeys. And now human beings are sort of the last species that is currently being sort of tested. The problem is that you can't really do a longevity study in human beings because you either have to wait for people to die, right? Or you have to use other biomarkers to infer whether people will be actually living longer, right? Mm-hmm. So point being is that like all across nature, intermittent fasting is a tool that not only improves or increases the amount of time that you spend on the planet, but it decreases your risk for diabetes and heart disease and cancer and atherosclerosis and fatty liver disease and Alzheimer's disease. And it's just like this, the list goes on and on and on. So the animals that eat the least food die they live the longest and they die of the least amount of disease. So in the context of diabetes, the reason why we do actually talk about it in our program and we do recommend that people do it, but obviously it's not mandatory, is simply because it's so powerful at helping you get control over your blood glucose and helping you clear out the accumulated fatty acids that have built up over time inside of your muscle and liver. And if I had to sort of like summarize diabetes in one sentence, it would literally be that diabetes is caused by insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is the overaccumulation of fatty acids the overaccumulation of fatty acids in your muscle and liver, which are two tissues that are not designed to store fatty acids in large quantities. So when you eat a diet that's basically, high in fat, a typical standard American diet, or maybe even a ketogenic diet or low carbohydrate diet, you end up accumulating fat inside of your muscle and inside of your liver. And over the course of time, that builds insulin resistance and more and more and more and more. And then after 10, 15, 20 years of doing that, you end up with, a very high risk for chronic disease and especially diabetes. Intermittent fasting reverses that.
Yeah, no, that's extremely interesting. Do you think because intermittent fasting is so popular among people who implement a ketogenic diet, that those initial benefits are from the intermittent fasting? Or do you just believe that it does cause some initial short-term improvements, but just the long-term implications of doing a ketogenic diet is just, you don't do you know what I mean? It's just more short-term instead of long-term.
Yes, it's a great question. And I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about the most concise way to say this. And I think I've come up with it, which is that intermittent fasting can be used either as a Band-Aid approach to counteract the negative effects of a low nutrient diet, than like a ketogenic diet or low carbohydrate diet. Okay. So it's a Band-Aid that actually prevents those diets from, creating excess metabolic risk in a very fast manner. Or you can use intermittent fasting to add to the metabolic benefits of a nutrient dense diet. So if you're eating a nutrient poor diet, then intermittent fasting is something that'll basically mitigate the development of chronic disease. But if you're eating a nutrient dense diet, like you would find in a plant-based diet or a low fat plant-based whole food diet, then intermittent fasting is just another tool that's going to make that nutrient dense diet that much more powerful.
I love that. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I love how you explain that. So it's a good job condensing that down. I think that's incredible. And that's amazing. And like, as far as the keto diet and I know that is big when people do have diabetes, like that's kind of pushed a lot more now. Just because it is lower carb, that type of thing that you hear all the time. Have you guys like come across research that shows that it is extremely negative to somebody that does have diabetes in the long term, or has there been enough research to show longer effects on people, or even negative effects short term, which I'm sure it's starting to show?
Of like low carbohydrate and ketogenic diets in particular?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a great question. In the world of low carbohydrate and ketogenic diets, if you go into the research, what you'll find is there's two giant mistakes that occur. Number one, there's a collection of studies that basically directly compare low carbohydrate diets versus low fat diets. And they usually conclude that a low carbohydrate diet is better. It results in more weight loss, reduced A1C, better improvement in blood glucose control, better improvement in, reduced blood pressure, reduced cholesterol, you name it. The problem is that when they do these studies, they do not compare apples to apples. They're comparing apples to oranges. So what they will do is they'll take a group of people who are eating a low carbohydrate diet and they will put them onto a very low carbohydrate diet, which is like 30 grams of carbohydrate per day. Okay, that's considered a ketogenic diet or a very, very low carbohydrate diet. And then they will compare that group versus another group of people that's eating a quote unquote low fat diet, in which the total proportion of fat calories coming into the diet is 30%. Okay. Now, under no circumstances is a diet that contains 30% of calories from fat considered low fat. That is not even close to low fat. What we recommend in our program is between 10 and 15% of your diet as fat. And only once you achieve that level, like 10 to 15%, that's truly considered low fat. So what they're doing is they're comparing a very low carbohydrate diet versus a not low fat diet. And then they're saying, oh, look, by the way, the ketogenic diet won, right? It resulted in better metabolic outcomes. Okay. So that's the first mistake. Now, the second mistake is that they always do studies in small groups of people in over short periods of time. So there's a number of papers that, you can go into detail about why a ketogenic diet, results in incredible, very fast weight loss and reduced A1C and reduced blood glucose control. But if you really read the details, you'll find out that these studies are done in people in, groups of people like 150 or 200 or 250 or 500 people. And they're studied over the course of like 10 weeks to 3 months or 10 weeks to 6 months, right? So we're talking small groups of people over short periods of time. If you really want to understand what's going to happen to people in the long term, then you have to perform studies that are performed in large numbers of people over long periods of time. You got to look at literally 100,000 people, 500,000 people, and study them over the course of 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, 15 years to try and find out what's happening to their cardiovascular risk, what's happening to their diabetes risk, what's happening to their cancer risk.
Like trying to study size all in.
Exactly. And when you look at the studies that actually do larger groups of people over long periods of time, it's very clear at that point, people who consume more, higher carbohydrate diets or lower fat diets end up with better outcomes, reduced risk for all chronic disease, period. And people who eat lower carbohydrate diets or higher fat diets end up with more metabolic problems in the long term.
No, that's all like amazing. And like, it's super interesting. I mean, with a lot of these studies though, they're all done so short term. Like you said, it's really hard to see what's going to happen long term because like, yeah, it might look good on paper to lose 30 pounds in 3 weeks and like your A1C stabilizes, but like what's happening in your body once you get out of like that initial state,
100%.
It's really crazy to me how all of that is done. And like, I want to talk for a minute on the summit that you guys are doing right now with Mastering Diabetes, because I know you guys have one coming up, and by the time this is out, I think it's going to be over with, but they can go back and watch it. So if you kind of want to talk about that and just like the different topics they can learn about, because I know you guys are going to be going into a lot more detail on some of the topics that you guys have touched on the podcast. So I'd love to hear, what's going down with that and just how people can plug in to the summit.
Yes. So we interviewed the world's leading experts in the field of plant-based nutrition and asked them about a lot of topics, specifically mostly on diabetes, but also a lot more than just diabetes. So like Cyrus was talking about cardiovascular risk, that's a huge deal. So heart disease, talking about that. Alzheimer's, talking about that. Talking about, how do you reduce your chances of getting things like cancer? How does this come back to insulin resistance? So these topics are covered by so many great experts, and we have in all different phases. I'm sure Cyrus can tell you all about the different phases we have.
Yeah, absolutely. So this summit is actually, it's like a labor of love for Robby and I, because we sink in an unbelievable amount of time in interviewing these experts and really getting to the root cause of a lot of the confusion that exists in the world of diabetes. So, we've broken it up this year. We have 35 speakers, which is, the larger, we had 25 speakers last year. So phase 1 is in understanding insulin resistance. And we have speakers including Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. David Katz, Dr. Garth Davis, myself, and then Dr. Michelle McMacken, talking about what are the actual true causes of insulin resistance in diabetes. Like, let's really start there and understand the problem, and then we can move on. Phase 2 is where you talk about how to reverse insulin resistance using whole food plant-based nutrition. So there we interview people like Dr. Michael Greger, Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Joel Kahn, Dr. John McDougall, Dr. Joel Furman. I mean, these are the guys that are writing the New York Times bestselling books.
Right.
And these are the guys that have, an unbelievable amount of experience. Next we go into phase 3, which is understanding the whole body impact of low-fat plant-based whole food nutrition. So here we interview people like Brenda Davis, who's just a walking encyclopedia, Dr. Ronald Weiss, Dr. Rick Dina. And these interviews basically help people understand that, you can't heal your body selectively, meaning, you're not just eating a low-fat plant-based whole food diet to improve your diabetes health. It's also going to positively impact other, other systems within your body, your endocrine system in particular. And as a result of that, you're going to get, improved endocrine health across all tissues. You're going to get improved cardiovascular health, period, end of story. And there's nothing you can do to stop that process from happening. Phase 4 is about mastering the mental and emotional aspects of lifestyle change. So this is where we go into detail about, how do you communicate with other people? How do you handle difficult situations that arise that are both mental and physical by nature? So here we've interviewed Dr. Alan Goldhammer, who's a co-author of The Pleasure Trap, Dr. Susan Pierce Thompson, who teaches you, how to overcome food addiction. Adam Sudd, as we talked about multiple times, he teaches you exactly how to overcome food addiction using some very straightforward principles. Mark Ramirez, who's another one of our coaches. Danielle Hargenrader, she teaches you about how to really unleash your inner mental diabetes dominator. Then we go to phase 5, where we talk about, how to communicate with other people, with your friends, with your family, with medical professionals. Here we've interviewed Kylie Buckner, who's a registered nurse. She's my wife. She's unbelievably smart in the world of actually understanding how to communicate with people in a non-threatening manner. And then finally we get to phase 6. And here this is basically motivation and resources to make the transition. So we interview people like Juliana Heaver, Chef AJ, Rip Esselstyn, Andrew Taylor, who, had lost something like 120 pounds eating nothing but potatoes. And you understand people's personal stories and understand simple ways that you can make it actually practical in your life. So by kind of assembling it in this way over the course of a week, you get to understand, what's causing the problem, how do you reverse the problem, what do you do when people don't understand, how do you talk to your doctor, what's going to happen to my cardiovascular health, what's going to happen to my brain, and give me some motivation all along the way.
Right. No, I love that. That's amazing. And like, I love it because it covers all the bases. Plus you're talking to all of those incredible people. Like if you're listening and maybe all of those names sound new to you, or maybe they don't, all of those names he listed are very incredible people who are super intelligent and have amazing stories. So like by checking out the summit, you're going to be learning so much and hearing from people who are really just incredible. So I love everything that you guys are doing with that.
Thank you.
You know, I know that, I mean, obviously that's a big thing that you guys are working on. You have the program. Is there anything else that's happening in the future that you guys want to just share with people, or just I mean, just go check out the summit and check out the coaching program?
Yeah, one thing we do have coming up is we have a retreat in Costa Rica that
Very
is
cool.
starting on May 31st through June 4th. And it's going to be so much fun. This is going to be our 6th retreat that we have run. And we feed people an unlimited amount of whole plant foods. And the results that people see in 4 days is mind-blowing. And we have very fun exercise for people no matter what level of fitness they have, unlimited food, and then we have amazing lectures and a lot of fun. It's usually the group of people that come, they're meant to be there together, and people form new friendships that last for a lifetime. And it's just so much fun. So we'd love to have people join us there.
That's amazing.
And we also have a podcast. So if people want to check out our podcast, maybe
Awesome.
They don't have time to sit down and watch a YouTube video, check out our podcast, and you can listen to us while you're doing laundry, running, driving. We're there for you.
Perfect. Is it just Mastering Diabetes if they search on like iTunes?
Yes, they'll find that by searching Mastering Diabetes. Totally.
Awesome. And I'll put that link in the show notes. And then how can people follow you guys on social media? That way that I can include that in the notes as well.
So we are active on Facebook. So Facebook, where our page is called Mastering Diabetes. It's easy to find there. We also have a support group if people want to join on one of our free support groups where they can network with other people, and some of our coaches are in there as well. And then we are on YouTube. People should definitely join us on YouTube. We publish a lot of great videos there. It's just Mastering Diabetes on YouTube. We are on Instagram at Mastering Diabetes. We have lots of great food photos there, inspiration. And I am personally very active on my own Instagram at Mindful Diabetic Robby. There I do a lot of what I ate, basically Insta stories, and post pictures of what I'm eating, my fruit rack, and showing people that, yes, you can eat fruit living with diabetes. It does lead to the most insulin sensitive body you can have. And it's just a lot of fun.
Awesome. Did you have a personal one as well, Dr. Cyrus, that you wanted to share with people?
Actually, I think, yeah. So I have some Instagram accounts. Like I have Mango Man Nutrition, which is MANGOMAN, and then the word nutrition. To be perfectly honest, I'm not as active on social media. Robby is like the social media guru amongst us, and I try and stay away from it as much as possible. So all of the stuff that he mentioned is where we would find the bulk of the activity for sure.
Perfect. Sounds great. And then guys, just closing question that I ask every guest, and you guys can answer either separately or together, but if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's something that's been your biggest takeaway through your whole wellness journey so far, but if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
Keep an open mind. No matter how much you think you know, always be open to information, even if that information seems like it's coming out of left field and it's against what you believe to be true. If I had closed my mind to the idea that, being a vegetarian or a plant-based eater or a vegan or anything like that early in the day, if I closed my mind to that, I'd probably have some pretty poor health right now. But because I opened my mind to the idea that maybe something different that seems a little weird and a little bit, challenging could actually be an appropriate solution, that has sort of opened the door to a whole new world of things that I knew nothing about that has completely transformed me from the inside out. No question.
Yeah. So I'm gonna agree with that and just add to the that concept of have an open mind and come join our free summit. It's free. Come and learn this amazing information, and we hope to see you there.
Awesome. No, I love it. And thank you guys so much for taking time to come on. I loved having you, and I know that you guys are going to just change so many lives. So just thank you guys so much.
Thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And we love your energy. You interview some incredible people on your podcast, and we totally appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, it's been a real honor to be on your show, and thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Dr. Cyrus and Robby. I love the work they're doing, so be sure to give them a follow on social media to keep up with everything that they've been working on. You can find their social media links, podcast link, and website that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drkaseyjohnson.com. That's drkaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So all of Dr. Cyrus's and Robby's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Dr. Cyrus and Robby, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Thank you guys so much again for tuning into today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.